Hello and welcome to Parker's Previews, part of Hit the Books on the Hammer Betting Network, powered by Circa Sports. Bet like the pros with the world's largest sports book right at your fingertips. Circa Sports. Experience big app bets with the highest betting limits, better money line splits with the lowest hold percentage, best customer service, and more. Sports betting on the go has never been better. Now you can download, fund, and bet like a pro from anywhere in Nevada. Get your bookie today at circasports.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We're here with the last week of the regular season. Going to do, again, a little bit of a retrospective on how teams ended up throughout the season. We'll talk about Army-Navy this weekend and some edges. And we'll get a little look ahead into New Year's Six. Well, obviously things will change. We'll get a lot of new information with the bowl games. We'll talk a little bowl strategy today too, and we'll just look ahead at some of these New Year's Six games and bets we might make given some real time odds right now. So, again, thanks for tuning in. It's been fun this season to kind of figure out what I want this show to be and how it can best serve you and help us take stats and data and become better consumers of college football content, but also be better investors when it comes to these matchups. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, we have our college football landscape here. We've got all of our Power 5 teams opponent adjusted, and we've got their offensive and defensive efficiency here. And we see some really interesting groupings that I think are informative in the big picture as we kind of go into, didn't want to rotate that, as we go into bowl games here. So again, first I'll highlight the playoff teams because I think that's going to be informative as we see who these guys are. So you have TCU all the way down here. As a team who's pretty good with their offense, pretty underwhelming with their defense. Ohio State really, really good at offense all season, although that has flattened a little bit, and their defense is above average. And then the other two teams, Georgia and Michigan, of course, right out here. Here we go. Right out here, all the way to the right. Two of the best defenses. Definitely more defense forward. Their offenses kind of match TCU's. Ohio State is the outlier. You have, three teams whose offenses are of about a certain quality, and then Ohio State's is much better. We'll see how that kind of incorporates and how that factors in as we get into these matchups. But those are separate. A couple games that I think are really, really important to point out that will matter a lot when we're looking from a betting perspective of how are these teams going to match up. Kansas State and Alabama are just right here, right next to each other. So this is a bet I can already tell you right now, just looking at this, I'm going to be intrigued by this play because on the merits this season, Kansas State has been about as good as Alabama in opponent adjusted efficiency, both on offense and on defense. And there's going to be a huge motivation discrepancy here. So early betting on that, we'll talk about what the lines look like, will be very important if you can get in before the information. I think another one that's really important to point out that we won't necessarily talk about today, but is one that I have my eye on for early betting and we'll get to next week as we kind of get into our bowl games. Oklahoma is all the way down here behind Florida and Arkansas and Duke. And if you look, their bowl opponent is going to be Florida State, who is all the way up here playing on offense and defense, not including their special teams and their finishing drives and all that. Just play-to-play efficiency is playing as well as Georgia and Michigan. So those are two games that are non-playoff games that are very important to highlight and say, I think that there should be some discrepancies in motivation. There should be some discrepancies in potentially play. Another one to look at, Tennessee's defense has not been great, just barely better than average in an opponent adjusted sense. And they're going to play Clemson, who just absolutely wrecked a good North Carolina defense. And they're going to have their backup quarterback. So we'll see the matchups between these two, but we can also see that maybe we're going to have some issues here with some motivation as well. One last team that I'll circle in kind of our landscape as we move into actual bets and actual games. Southern Cal has just not been great on defense, especially this season. They've gotten really lucky with turnovers. They're really injured, as we saw in the conference championship game, and So there wasn't really a lot they could do in terms of coming back in terms of being physical. So they're a team that I'm circling against a G5 opponent in the Cotton Bowl as a team that I want to see where the line lands because I'm really interested in where that early betting is. So today we'll start out and talk about Army Navy because again I think there's some really good matchups and that's a really fun game. And then we'll talk about the New Year's Six games here, some of these games that I've circled and kind of get into it. As we figure out what we want from a decision making process going into bowl games here, knowing that opt outs and everything are important. So that's something I would say that's really really important here is that you have to do a lot of homework in bowl season here because so much of it is just going to be this player opted out and that changes everything. And you're gonna. I generally like to divide teams into kind of like developmental teams and developed teams because I believe that the developmental teams will have a lot more to play for. They'll really enjoy those bowl practices. Those will be really important for their teams. And what they'll be able to do then is kind of challenge some of these more established, better talented programs just because those programs are over it this season. And so we'll frame that next week a lot in terms of who's motivated, who's not, especially in the lower bowls. And just kind of thinking about like which teams are going to have kind of a culture fit and an opt-out fit where they will be able to play full strength or close to full strength in a meaningful way in a bowl. And you really got to keep tabs on that because that can change and be pretty rapid with these bowl games. So make sure that you're doing your homework there. Make sure that you're understanding that we're looking at cross conferences. There's tried and true strategies like fading the MAC and bowl season that are certainly still in play, even with opt-outs. You want to look for huge talent disparities. You want to look for spots. Kentucky, Iowa, for instance, backup quarterbacks, nobody cares. Music City Bowl, kind of a spot that you're like, hey, maybe I'm going to stay away from this one entirely because that under has gotten really, really low. And neither of these teams really feel like they're bringing much to the table. Whereas, again, like the Florida State, I think is a really good example of them over Oklahoma. Oklahoma's had a really, really rough season. They're going to be out of it. A team like Washington or UCLA in their bowl game might be very, very intriguing because they still do have something to play for here. So we'll go through all those line by line. Let's get over to Army and Navy and start there. So you could see all the games we're going to go through. Army and Navy, I have this as one of the lowest total games I've projected overall. Current odds, it has been a pick, it has been Navy, it has been Army. It's kind of all over the place. The best current odds you can get right now are Navy minus 2.5 at minus 107 or Army minus 1.5 at plus 135 odds. And so you can get both Army and Navy favored. I would be inclined towards Army plus 2.5 points here because I have them favored outright. So if you can somewhere get Army as a dog, all the better as well. Currently it's Caesars minus 110 to both sides, negative 10 for Navy, negative 2.5. Navy is a favorite, plus 2.5 for Army being the underdog here. The total has been all over the place. I've seen it at 33. I bet it at 33. I'm worried about betting it much lower than that, 32.5. These unders in these Army Navy games absolutely cash. This is just something that happens. These teams are designed to play well against each other. They're designed to they're designed to kind of muck things up and to have very, very slow drives. We're looking at, you can see number 129 and number 130 in early downs, in rush rate over expected. So Army and Navy are both rushing more than 30% more than the average team in any given situation. And a couple things that I think are notable and why I'm leaning towards leaning towards Army here is a lot of times these games are determined not by the down-to-down efficiency, but who can get the explosive play. Navy has not been very good in the passing game. And not very good in the passing success game at all. So Navy's offense 130th in passing success rate, 87th in rushing success rate, but they are 46th in EPA per rush. They are getting a big rush every now and then, but they're not getting a big pass ever. They're 90th in EPA per pass. So This Army run defense has not been great by any stretch of the imagination, 116th in the nation, but it's a lot different against a team that you know what they're going to do, a team that you are going to play a little bit different stylistically against than you do, a basic spread team who can line up and run the ball. And in terms of talents, disparity that is going to be a little bit different here. So this Army defense, I think, will be able to stop Navy's run. And if you take that away from them, regardless of who a quarterback has been, Navy has just not been able to generate any explosive passing plays. I don't know that they'll be able to kind of generate the big plays that are so famous in the triple option, where it's short run, big pass, and if Navy can't get that consistently, and this Army rush defense plays a little bit better than it has, Navy's going to be in a hard spot if Army can put points on the board, and Army certainly can put points on the board. They're 32nd in EPA per play offense, 40th in EPA per pass, and 29th in EPA per rush. So very high volume here. Army's averaging 29.4 points per game. Navy only 22.4. Army 385 yards per play, or yards per game. Navy just 330 there as well. So both teams well under 100 yards passing. But again, the volume of passing is not what matters in comparing these offenses. It's the timing and efficiency of passing. One thing I really like to see from Army here, and that I think is going to be decisive, is that Army is really great at finishing drives. They're 22nd in points per quality possession, averaging 4.59 points per. Navy's defense 118th, averaging 4.70. So a huge discrepancy there, something that Army is really good at, Navy's really bad at. And finally, the big split that leads me to believe this is going to go in Army's favor. Army is 16th on early downs. So whereas Navy is 28th on late downs on offense, right? They're able to play that kind of 3 yards in a cloud of dust, triple option, typical, extend drives on third downs. Army's actually moving the ball on first and second down. They're avoiding those third downs, or they're getting into really, really favorable third down situations, and then they're able to capitalize. So that early down explosiveness, I think, is something that really, really matters and will be really, really frustrating for Navy's defense, which has been 120th in the nation overall and 110th on early downs to factor into. So what I'm looking here in this game is a slight edge towards Army. So if you can get Army in any points, I think that's a bet that I would take. That's going to be the official play, is Army as a dog. If you can get 2.5, awesome. If you can get 1.5, that's fine. And I really think that Army here is going to be a surprising team in terms of the way that they're able to move the ball on offense and the way that Navy is not able to move the ball on offense here. I think the under is probably bet at this point too much for us to get any value there. I'm seeing, 32.5 at some places. I certainly wouldn't want to bet an over. You can see I'm projecting just about 37 points, which is very, very low. Absent of like some insane weather or insane act of God, you really don't want to bet that low under if it's gotten under 33. So I think there's not a lot of value on the under, but we're going to ride with Army as an underdog here, 2.5 points at Circa Sports. Let's walk a little bit, checking on my time. Let's walk a little bit on through the New Year's Six here and see what we can get. We'll start with the playoff games, actually. I have this ordered backwards to end with the playoff games, but I want to start with the playoff games. Let's start with TCU and Michigan here. We've got TCU, Michigan in the Fiesta Bowl, TCU's first playoff appearance ever. Michigan repeating their playoff performance from last year, certainly. You can see this at current lines. You can get TCU plus 9.5. You're paying a lot for that, though, minus 122. I think your best bet here, looking at the current value, is TCU plus 8. You can get that at minus 110 certain places, plus 7.5 currently at Caesars. And looking at my numbers, I have this just inside of 7 points, inside of a touchdown. And so in terms of a look-ahead line, especially knowing Blake Corum's not going to play, you can absolutely, if you could snag TCU plus 9.5, TCU plus 8, I think this would be a time to do it. And if it gets much smaller than 7, you could certainly hedge and try and get Michigan minus inside a touchdown as a favorite there as well. So I really think that early out, we're going to be looking at a couple of things. One, TCU's EPA per pass, despite their bad passing success rate, they are super explosive in the pass game. They will go downfield. They will chuck the ball, and they have Quentin Johnston who can do that against almost anybody in the nation. And so I think that TCU's high volume offense will help them stay within range of a Michigan team that really just wants to play bully ball, that really wants to slow things down. Michigan 115th in rush rate over expected, you can see, but they're still 19th in EPA per pass, so they're selecting well with their pass game. It will be interesting to see how Michigan attacks this TCU defense, given that TCU is 64th in EPA per play defense. They're 48th in EPA per rush defense, though. So definitely a lighter front than Michigan has seen all season. With Corum out, how will TCU be able to account for that? And there's been some injuries about Johnny Hodges, TCU's run-stopping linebacker. But I will say that TCU has played 11 straight games going into the Big 12 championship, and now they'll have a month off to prepare. So definitely a team that I think could surprise expectations there and keep this thing respectable, especially if you can get that 9.5 or 8.5 number. Moving quickly, Ohio State, Georgia. It's just hard for me to think that Ohio State's going to be able to keep up with the physicality of Georgia. If you think that Georgia is effectively just a better version of Michigan in every way, shape, and form, even if the numbers and the efficiency have this close, I really think I would lean towards Georgia early. You can currently get that, -6.5 basically everywhere. Seeing a couple -7s overall in terms of odds here, but I think that -6.5, yep, right there at Caesars, -6.5 at -110 is your best Georgia bet to start here. Just keeping it under. That way they just have to cover by a touchdown. So any kind of late game nonsense, whatever happens. But also we've seen that Ohio State, if it's not working, can just kind of fold it up and go home. Specifically, I think that Georgia's EPA per rush is a little bit underinflated by the style of play. The last couple of weeks, they're 69th in EPA per rush. Ohio State is 11th on defense. And so I think that number is going to outkick projections, certainly, as Ohio State struggles defensively to defend the run and to match up with the unique reality of Georgia's dynamic offense that has not only downfield threats in the pass game, but also downfield threats in like the tight end short game as well. So they're really dynamic. I have no reason to believe that Georgia shouldn't cover that 6.5. All right, moving quickly, just going to look at odds, not going to make picks on the other New Year's Six Bowls so far. Penn State, Utah, I think really, really good game between two physical teams and two teams culturally who should play hard in bowl season. I was trying to be diplomatic about that, but the reality is they sometimes teams aren't. Penn State +3 as an underdog is very intriguing to me, especially if you don't have to pay anything to make that move from 2.5 to getting that extra 3. Currently, the best odds I think you can get are Penn State -103 for +3, which is pretty good overall. Caesars has this right in line there, +3 at -110. And so Penn State as an underdog is intriguing just because they defensively match up really nicely for what Utah want to do. They want to put a lot of pressure on the quarterback and put a lot of pressure on Cam Rising to make him have to make, Herculean plays to win. And Penn State is certainly capable of being disruptive there. Utah's defense has been better against the pass than the rush. And so where Penn State struggles on offense, Utah also kind of struggles on defense. So I think there's some physical gains there that Penn State could certainly plan and scheme for over this next month. Another big disparity is just to look at Penn State on late downs. They're 42nd on 3rd and 4th down success compared to Utah's 7th in defense. I think quality of opponent probably adjusts that much more in Penn State's favor. Another interesting one that I think an early bet would be a lot of fun for Tulane USC. You can currently get that at +2, +2.5 for Tulane as an underdog here. Again, with the opt-outs, you saw that USC has a bad defense and Tulane actually has a pretty good offense. Willie Fritz is staying. Their making a lot of strides here, specifically in the run game. The Tulane running back has just been magnanimous this season. They're 24th in EPA per play overall on the rush game, but they're 52nd in the pass game, even as they're rushing 4.1% more than the average team. So Tulane really gets a good spot here. Against a motivation discrepancy against a beatdown defense who's disappointed they didn't make the playoff. Caleb Williams probably not playing if I had to read the tea leaves here. So if you could get this while it's 2.5 for Tulane, I think you're making a smart investment. Clemson, Tennesse is one that I don't know that I'll play at all just because it depends on who plays on both sides. I would lean Clemson because Tennessee doesn't have Hendon Hooker, and similar to USC, they have a bad defense, and they felt like they got left out of the playoff and kind of fizzled down the season. Clemson playing much better down the stretch here, but the discrepancy here is: do I want to bet on Clemson's 73rd EPA per play pass to be able to exploit Tennessee's 117th passing defense? And I'm a little bit worried about that with a year or with a month of preparation. The last one I want to talk about today, Kansas State, Alabama. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. One thing that really stands out to me is that Alabama cannot get the run game going, and that's what Kansas State's defense has actually been bad at defending, is the run game. Alabama's 37th in EPA per rush. Kansas State is 87th on defense. And so Alabama has not really shown an ability to kind of generate good, consistent running play. And that will be a decisive factor here in this game. Look at Bryce Young opting out. Look at Jahmyr Gibbs opting out, possibly. And Kansas State with a lot to play for, and certainly a culture pick here as well. That one's pretty interesting to me. But next week, we'll get in with some official plays on these bowls as they come. Today, the only one I have is Army plus 2.5, wherever you can get that as a dog. And then looking ahead to some of these lines, hopefully these are informative for you. You've been watching Hit the Books on the Hammer Betting Network, powered by Circa Sports. Bet like the pros with the world's largest sports book right at your fingertips. Circa Sports. Experience big app bets with the highest betting limits, better money line splits with the lowest hold percentage, best customer service, and more. Get your new bookie today at circasports.com. Thanks for watching Hit the Books. We'll be back next week with some bowl picks.